Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what a mortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? The Tiger, by William Blake. It's a beautiful day, Big Mocker. The air is clean, the feeling is warm, beauty is all around us, and there is solitude within loneliness. My name is Tyler Sky Gordon, and today I want to tell you about an independent coming-of-age film project about suffering, loneliness, friendship, and discovering what is truly worth living for. Today, I want to tell you about my project, Keep Surviving. Jason Grant is a young man suffering from clinical depression, crippling anxiety, and suicidal tendencies while sulking through his final year of high school and adolescence in a small, southern American town. While self-medicating, abusing prescription medications, and feeling a lack of belonging, Jason becomes passionate about film and literature and finds himself wishing for his own manic pixie dream girl, a larger-than-life, beautiful female who will pull him out of his dull and agonizing existence. Yet, when a pink-haired punk rocker girl enters his world and attempts to shake things up, he'll discover that not only is he not alone and beautiful people still exist, but even our ideas of perfection and happiness are often more complex than meets the eye. The grass isn't always greener on the other side, and even for those that believe they are broken, perhaps they're only a little bent, and it's best to keep a chin up and simply keep surviving. Jason Grant is a 17-year-old male and the protagonist of this film. Jason Grant is your typical loner. He believes that he is the only one who enjoys the things he enjoys and acts the way he does in his high school. Although he's a bright kid, his own ignorance and argumentative personality tend to lead him in the farthest direction from his goals, which is to ultimately make friends, conquer his depression, and evaporate his loneliness. He's been in such a rut for such a long time that his negativity is the closest thing he has to a feeling of being comfortable. Jason's mother, although loving, has debt collectors knocking on her door on a regular basis and an abusive boyfriend. While Jason assumes there isn't a single hope for him, he finds passion in filmmaking, and through his love for young adult literature, he discovers the concept of a manic pixie dream girl. As a hopeless romantic and arguably the last virgin in Dawson County High School, he starts to wish for a perfect girl of his own, and then the broken and wondrous Emily Morse enters his life. Emily Morse is a 17-year-old female, and she is the manic pixie dream girl of our story. Emily is a spunky, punky teenage girl with vibrant hot pink hair and an attitude. Jason instantly falls in love with her, and while the two characters bond, they both start to realize how similar each other are. However, where Jason sits and mopes in his pit of depression and despair, self-medicating and abusing drugs that don't belong to him, Emily suffers in actuality. Emily is a foster child who's never known her real parents. She spent her childhood hopping from family to family, but as a problem child, she has never entirely been wanted. As she approaches her 18th birthday, she is left with her grandmother, a Hollywood star in her golden years now, suffering from terminal lung cancer in Dawsonville, Georgia. Emily falls for Jason as quickly as he does for her, but grows negative when she now not only is tasked with taking care of her grandmother and faking a smile just to survive, and stop her past of self-harm and losing all she's ever loved, but she's also now tasked with the unreal and impossible concept that she's the only hope for saving Jason from himself. Unlike Jason, she actually has been clinically diagnosed with a multitude of psychological disorders and spends her weekends raving in Atlanta and drowning her problems in drugs and alcohol. Although Jason plans to use her as an idea rather than a complex individual person, and he just wants to use her to save himself, in a way, he ends up saving her more than she ends up saving him. They both go on a year-long adventure of abuse, depression, and Alfred Hitchcock while they find beauty in each other, the world around them, and what it means to truly, truly be alive. Now, the story becomes very complex as the actions rise and the climax ultimately reaches its peak. The way this works is we get a lot of scenes where Jason and Emily are falling for each other and ultimately bringing each other to a point where they each can be happy. However, their ultimate goal is a promise that they make to each other to find beautiful people, to branch out of their small town and really discover what it means to be happy again after they've been suffering from depression and anxiety for so long. things really start to hit the fan and reach a point where everything explodes when Emily decides that she wants to take Jason to a rave and have him experience the life of hard drugs. He ends up taking LSD and having a quote-unquote bad trip where he has an anxiety attack in the bathroom and ends up meeting a good friend who ultimately shows him a different side of beauty through expression and poetry and literature and the things that Jason loves. We come to find out that Emily only raves and does these hard drugs because of the crazy amount of stress and anxiety that she's experiencing in her own life that she can't cope with. So after this period where Emily leaves Jason having this anxiety, suffering from this terrible effect of hallucinogenic drugs, they split apart. Their friendship is lost. The love that they shared for each other dissipates as they both needed each other in a moment that neither was there for each other. Eventually, the friend that picked up Jason after his panic attack explains to him that if he truly loves Emily and he really has finally found a person that he's beautiful, that he wants to share this moment in his life with, then he needs to chase after this woman. He needs to go get her. And ultimately they do, and they meet in a beautiful spot, and they have their first kiss, but all is not completely resolved in the story. Eventually, Christmas arrives, Jason's parents go on a cruise, and he shares Christmas with Emily. Emily's grandmother gives him a camera, and he's allowed to finally fulfill his passion of wanting to make independent film. However, as things start to look up for everybody in the story, Emily's grandmother, who's suffering from terminal cancer, has to be checked into the hospital and eventually dies from this illness that is so disgusting and so evil that it breaks her down. She dies, and they have a funeral. Now, considering the fact that Emily is not yet 18 and is still technically in the foster kids program, she understands that she's not going to be able to stay in Dawsonville any longer. She's not going to be able to keep a part of her in Jason's life. Jason is okay with this now, as he understands that they'll always have the love that they shared for each other, and they'll always be able to keep these beautiful memories, and then now he can be happy knowing that there are people in this world that are capable of inspiring and creating and imagining in a new way and throwing passion into everything that they interact with. He's now ready to fulfill his dreams and to graduate, and he feels better about his life, and so does Emily, but not anymore, as everything that she loves starts to crumble around her. This world that she created in this new place that she allowed to be her home is no longer, and it eventually leads to a suicide attempt, where Jason is so broken up because at the beginning of our film he tried to commit suicide himself, and it was Emily and his own idea of breaking free from the negativity that he faced all his life that brought him out of this. And he was under the impression that the joy that Emily brought to him, the joy he brought to her, the way that they made friends, the way that they inspired each other, the way that they created together, and the memories, the lifelong memories that they created together, would never allow her to break down to her worst again. But it does, and Emily attempts to commit suicide. Ultimately, she's able to be stopped by Jason at the last minute, and they go back to their favorite spot in town and really sit and have a great time. But that's really the climax of this story, is when, after these two are able to finally pull themselves after the dark pits that they have been living in their entire lives, Emily falls completely, and all the progress that they made completely breaks. It ultimately resolves when they graduate, they talk things over, Emily decides how stupid this all was, and she pulls herself out of this pit, with the help of Jason. It's not necessarily trying to prove the point that you need other people to be happy, and it's other people's job and duty to pull you out of the negative feelings that you're feeling. But at the same time, she allows him to represent everything that she's built up until this point. How she's fought time and time again through drug use and through depression and through anxiety and through all the psychological issues that she's facing. She's allowed Jason to be this person that she can finally open up to, that she doesn't have to pretend to anymore. And she lets him into her world. Her world breaks, but she gets out of it. And the movie ends and completely resolves when they graduate, when they feel happy about their lives, and when they're ready to move on to the future. Jason wants to move to Hollywood or to his favorite town in the world, San Francisco, because of the beautiful art that's there. Emily wants to stay behind. She wants to help people. She wants to become a therapist. She wants to move at one point, but she still feels like she has more that she has to build. She still has this home that she's not come to believe in yet in Dawsonville. And eventually they part ways. I grew up in a small southern town in Georgia called Dawsonville. I had always been a rather popular kid with a good group of friends and my head held high. However, once I entered high school, I discovered that I was different than the other students. While they wanted to play football, go hunting, and wear camo, I was interested in intellectual conversation, thought-provoking cinema, dark and emotional literature. I felt like I was above the rest of my society, and most importantly, I felt like I didn't belong. I had barely any friends, and I started to suffer heavily from self-diagnosed depression and anxiety. Finally, I was put on medication after experiencing suicidal thoughts, but I stopped taking my pills because I didn't believe in the feeling of being numb like they made me feel. Instead, it was branching out, opening my mind, and meeting new people who thought the way I did to allow me to understand that I wasn't alone. And just because the place I was wasn't ideal or didn't match who I thought I was, people are still beautiful and complex, and ultimately, what it really takes to pull yourself out of your worst situations is yourself. It's all a matter of changing your perspective and in turn, changing your reality. I decided that my dream was to create a coming-of-age film similar to those that I enjoyed when I was in high school. But it was important to me to make a film that didn't fit the mold of boy is sad, boy meets girl, boy is in love, boy is not sad, boy turns 18 and graduates and everything's okay. I wanted something real. I wanted something deeper than that. I pulled from my own life, my own hometown, my own troubles. After numerous attempts to finally figure out what kind of story I really wanted to write or film, I was suffering from a severe anxiety episode and laying in bed. I decided to check my email and found a letter written by a classmate who I normally viewed as being dumb or ugly and even bullied her at one point. Even through all my negativity, she respected me and enjoyed my intelligence and enjoyed my work. Her email expressed how she understood how I felt, didn't blame me for being rude, and basically just wanted to help me and be a friend. Finally, at the end of her letter, she said, "Anyways, Tyler, please keep surviving." When I went back to school, I thanked her for helping me realize that I should never give up on myself and others, and we've been wonderful friends ever since. And that moment and that email and that one line just inspired me to create a story that was about surviving and about understanding that you can overcome your most ridiculously agonizing days, the terrible trials and tribulations that you face in life, and even mental illnesses. All it takes is yourself to pull yourself out of a dark pit. One individual that I am so ecstatic to work with in general, and so happy that we've hired on this project, is Stephen Chbosky. Chbosky is the writer of the novel The Perks of Being a Wallflower, and he went on to write, direct, and edit the film adaptation of his work under the same title. After reading his book and practically worshipping his movie adaptation, plus listening to countless interviews with him, I've come to realize a few things about him. One of these key elements is his passion to tell a teen story where the characters are real and not viewed as being unimportant or inexperienced for the simple fact of their age and nothing more. Within the commentaries on his DVD, it is revealed how much he loves his cast, how through his direction they were able to have one of the greatest filmmaking experiences of their lives. The main reason why I want to work with him and why I'm so glad to have him on board is because in his own film, the shots he gets and his reasoning for these shots was so genuine, so transparent. He shot the film in the town he grew up in, and in my own project, we share that same aspect. Each scene and experience his characters face were based strictly on things he experienced during his own adolescence. This is so magnificently important to me. Personally, I often believe that I had a high school experience that didn't entirely line up correctly with what others typically describe when reminiscing. I was a bit of an outcast, and due to this, I wanted to create a story that was honest and raw in which kids like me could watch it and feel like they belonged. Steven's movie, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, did this in his own way, and now I want to have him on board to help me do it in my own way. He told his high school story, and now it's my turn. This being said, due to the fact that he has made a film so similar to my dream, I know that his eye and the way he understands what it means to be a kid and create unforgettable moments will give me exactly what I need to create something beautiful with him. The key demographic that we're hoping to target and hit with this particular project are individuals who fit within the label of adolescence. This market includes children and teenagers aged 13 to 19. I aim to target high school students, especially those that are going through similar situations to that of the protagonist, Jason, someone battling mental illness and a feeling of isolation. Considering the fact that the troubling times and the experience of breaking free of your childhood are elements of life that both sexes are forced to come to terms with, we're not going to target either males or females, but both. We're hoping to reach and inspire everyone who needs my movie and its raw subject matter, which is suicide and depression. Topics that are ignored or typically not talked about, but are huge problems that need to be faced. This project and its contents mirror parts of the experience that I encountered during my own high school career. Therefore, I want kids who I can relate to consume this film. This includes intellectual people with a bit of a think-outside-the-box sort of attitude. Daydreamers, night thinkers, full to the brim with angst and inspiration and creativity. Children who enjoy deep and meaningful literature, films that aren't typically of the action and adventure genre, but drama instead. People who frequent sites such as Tumblr and listeners of independent music. It will prove equally important to note the wisdom is in also targeting the parents of these struggling kids. Mothers and fathers who typically wouldn't come across this type of project otherwise. We live in a society that is suffering so beautifully of mental illness. Most of these sufferers being young kids and teenagers. There is obviously a conversation that needs to be discussed between parents and their offspring, and I hope that by targeting parents as well as these kids, we can Keep Surviving act as a kickstart for thoughts to be expressed and conversations aimed at fixing something that needs to be fixed to begin. In my eyes, this project absolutely has to be made. It needs to be made for these kids who are suffering, it needs to be made for parents, it needs to be made for doctors, and it really needs to be made for me. Growing up, I struggled with depression, I struggled with anxiety, I struggled with suicidal thoughts, I struggled with apathy, and I struggled with OCD. Until my final year of high school, I felt isolated, I felt alone, I felt that the only option was to throw in the towel. Now that I have escaped the terrifying pit which lacked any light whatsoever, the pit that I had evidently ended up digging myself, I never want another child to ever have to feel so absolutely broken. Children are so full of opportunity, bursting with creativity and imagination. An endless number of mind-blowing and beautiful lives are ahead of them if they'd only realize and truly understand that. They are so unique and astoundingly brilliant. It's this reasoning that leads me to believe until the end of time that nobody should ever feel like they are worthless, good for nothing, and anything short of absolutely incredible. This project needs to be produced, and it needs to be produced successfully, so that anybody who struggled during adolescence or is currently struggling with the most difficult moments of their lives can realize, understand, and overcome. It's important to understand that just because you're hurting or in a negative situation, put down by your own mental illness, it doesn't mean that you're broken, and you shouldn't let your troubles become an excuse to stop trying. I made that mistake, and I'm proud of the place that I am currently standing in my life. but I realize all the opportunities I've missed out on simply because I was under the impression that none of it mattered in the first place. At the same time, most parents grew up in an age that didn't fully understand mental illness and the dangers they allow. To me, parents aren't able to talk to their children who are suffering, and vice versa. There are conversations regarding the subject matter that absolutely need to be addressed. In some cases, these conversations, these talks, can change lives and save lives. That is my goal. I want to use this project to start a conversation of the utmost importance, inspire, and hopefully mend lives. Finally, Big Mocker, I would just like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your time. My wish to you is that you never forget to stop and smell every rose upon which you encounter. I hope that you discover, learn, and enjoy each and every day that falls upon you in your lifetime. Equally, I hope you enjoy the concept of something very, very dear to my heart, Keep Surviving. I dream that it touched and inspired you in some way, and I thank you for your consideration. Please have a wonderful day.